Hi! In this video, we would be discussing all you need to know about cells. But before we go to that, let's get to know first what general biology is. Biology is a systematic study of life. And when we talk about life, it talks about every living organism that you may know. There are actually different branches of biology that you may be familiar with. One branch is botany, which deals with the study of plants. Another one is zoology, which focuses on animals. Genetics, which would be the study of inheritance and how traits are actually passed from one generation to another. Then we also have cytology, which is the study of cells. And lastly, we have histology as the study of tissues. There are different branches of biology, and if you're going to search for them, you'll have an endless result for the different branches of biology. So when we talk about life, we actually talk about its properties. It's actually hard to define what life is, but actually, we will be focusing on the properties that emerge as certain kinds of molecules become organized into cells. We would actually look at the different levels of organization in nature. As you can see in this figure, there are different levels to which they would have different characteristics for each. Okay, so the first level is actually your atom, and these are the fundamental building blocks of matter. And when we put together all those atoms, you would now be forming a molecule, which is an association of two or more atoms. For biology, we will be focusing on the biomolecules or the different organic molecules necessary for life. Next, we would have the cell, which is the smallest unit of life. The focus of this video would be the cell, so we would be discussing on that later. So next, when you put the cells together, you would actually form your tissues, which would later on form organs. And when you put your organs together, it would have an organ system. And once you have the different organ systems, you would have an organism. Okay? So an organism is an individual which is actually consisted of one or more cells. And then we have your population, which is a group of individuals of a species in a given area. And when you put those different populations together, you have a community. Okay. And then eventually you'll have an ecosystem, which are different communities interacting with their environment. And last, we have the biosphere, which refers to all regions of Earth that hold life. So when we talk about life, it's actually hard for us, as I mentioned a while ago, for us to define what life is. Okay? So there would be different definitions about life, and sometimes there would be different quotations about life. But the best way to study life is to look at its characteristics. Okay? So all living things actually share the same characteristics. Okay. So first, they require energy and nutrients. Second is they sense and respond to change. And last, they reproduce with the help of DNA. Okay. So what is common among these different characteristics? They actually start from the cells. Okay. So the cell is the focus of our video for today. Okay. Now, what exactly is a cell? So as we mentioned a while ago, the cell is the fundamental unit of all life. Okay? So when you put your cells together, again, you would form your tissues. And once you form your tissues, or once you have different tissues together, they could form now an organ. And once you put your different organs together, so each organ would have a different function. Collectively, they could form an organ system, which would have a general function again, and you would now form an organism. So this hierarchy both applies to animals and to plants. Okay? So a cell has the characteristics of life, and they do not function independently of one another. Okay? So even one cell has a characteristic or it has a function, but without the help of others, that cell would be um sort of useless. Okay? Now how do we measure cells? So cells are usually can be seen under the microscope. Okay? So different types of microscopes would actually use light or electrons to reveal the different details of your cell. So in this image, you actually see the purple one is the tip of the pin. Okay? So when magnified, you would see now some bacteria. As you could see, the yellow rods on the tip of the pin. Okay? So how do people started to get to know about cells? Okay, so no one actually knew cells existed until microscopes were invented, and we have Anton van Leeuwenhoek who actually started to see this microorganisms. Okay, so with the help of van Leeuwenhoek's microscope, so this is his invention, he was actually able to see different organisms. Okay, so he had observed the infusoria, which are actually the protists in the modern zoological classification. He was able to see the bacteria, the vacuole of the cell, and the spermatozoa, and also the banded pattern of muscular fibers. Okay, so before, people actually call this cells as animalcules and beasties. Animalcules from the term animal molecules. Okay, so that is where it all started. Okay, and then eventually in the 1600s, Robert Hooke actually improved the microscope, and he was able to observe now what we now call the cell. Okay, so he was the first to use the term cell. Okay, so he actually observed a cork, and as you know, a cork is actually a dead part of the plant. So he was able to see now structures like this shown in the image. So he actually coined the term cell similar to the cells of the monks. Okay? Eventually, in the 1800s, particularly in 1839, Matthias Leiden and Theodore Swan actually realized cells were alive and they proposed the cell theory. Okay? So this is now the different tenets of the modern cell theory. So first tenet says that all known living things are made up of cells. Okay? So second is the cell is structural and functional unit of all living things. Okay? So the third tenet is all cells come from pre-existing cells by division. Okay? So we will be discussing the different types of cell division in our upcoming videos. Okay, so next tenet is that cells contain hereditary information which is passed from cell to cell during cell division. And the next, all cells are basically the same in chemical composition. Okay, so we'll be discussing the different parts, and then you'll realize that they're really the same in chemical composition. And last, all energy flow, let's say the metabolism and the biochemistry of life occurs within the cells. Okay, so your cells are actually very important. Okay, without your cell, you're nothing. Okay, actually, life started from cells. Okay, so, diba, from the cells of your parents, okay, you have the sperm cell and the egg cell, and then there's you. Okay, so let's go to the different types of cells. So there are two basic types of cells, and we have the prokaryotic and the eukaryotic cells. Okay. Now for the eukaryotic cells, we would have further division. We have further types. We have the plant cells and the animal cells. Okay. So this diagram actually shows you the comparison between the eukaryotic cell and the prokaryotic cell. Okay. So common features of the eukaryotic and the prokaryotic cell, as seen in the image, is the presence of ribosomes. So that's one. Second is the presence of your cell membrane. Okay. And you would also have the presence of your DNA. Okay. So it's not visible in the picture. Now, for you to remember the different characteristics of the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, you should remember DORA. Okay, so D for DNA, O for organelles, R for reproduction, and A for average size. So I actually got this picture from bioninja.com. So this is actually helpful for us to review the difference between your prokaryotic and your eukaryotic cells. Okay, so for the prokaryotes, the DNA is naked. Okay, so the DNA is also circular, and it usually has no introns. Okay, so but for the eukaryotes, the DNA is bound to a protein and it is linear. Now, for the organelles, the prokaryotes don't have a nucleus. Okay, ito yung pinaka-distinct difference between them. Okay, prokaryote, kaya siya tinawag na prokaryote, pro meaning before. Karyo, or the karyote, we are actually referring to the nucleus. Okay, so the term prokaryotic and eukaryotic actually came from Greek words prokaryon and eukaryon. Okay, the karyon refers to the nucleus. Okay, so the EU part for the karyotic cell or the eukaryotes, the EU means true. Okay, so no nucleus for the prokaryotes, while you have a nucleus for your eukaryotes, and there are no membrane-bound organelles in the prokaryotes, while for the eukaryotes, you have the membrane-bound organelles. As you can see in this picture. Okay, so you would see now the mitochondrion and the endoplasmic reticulum. Here's the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi bodies, etc. Okay, so they are membrane bound. And for the prokaryotes, you have the 70S ribosomes, while for the eukaryotes, you have the 80S ribosomes. Okay, so the S actually refers to the Svedberg unit, which is used to classify now your ribosomes. Okay. Now, in terms of reproduction, the prokaryotes would undergo binary fission, and usually it involves a single chromosome. While for the eukaryotes, it would undergo mitosis and meiosis. Okay, and the chromosomes here are paired. Now, for the average size, the prokaryotes are smaller, or they are relatively smaller, at around 1 to 5 micrometers, while for the eukaryotes, they are definitely larger, around 10 to 100 micrometers. Okay. So here are the common parts of a cell. Okay. So cells can be vastly different, but again, they have different character. They have the same. Sorry, they have the same characteristics. Okay, or same parts. All cells have the following. Okay. So they have a cell membrane, cytoplasm, ribosomes, and your DNA or genetic information. Okay. Now let's go to the different cell parts and their functions. So first we have the plasma membrane, and these actually surrounds the cell and controls which substances move in and out. Okay, so it is the outermost membrane. Okay, it is characterized by a lipid bilayer, which is the structural foundation of cell membranes. Bilayer meaning two layers. Okay, so they're mainly composed of phospholipids arranged tail to tail in a bilayer. Okay. So I found this image about cell membranes. Okay, you may remember this. Sabi ng cell membrane, you must be the one for me since my selectively permeable membrane let you through. Okay, so that characteristic of your cell membrane that allows certain material or certain substances to move across them is called selective permeability. Okay, imagine if a cell would allow all organisms, I mean all substances to come inside the cell. Okay, there would be chaos inside the cell. Or what if the cell um would not be releasing, okay, or it would not let out other substances, okay? Let's say meron ng poisonous substance inside the cell and it doesn't release it outside. So what would happen? Okay, there would be disorder in your cell. Okay, so cell membranes, they regulate the movement of material, they separate the inside of the cell from the outside, they separate various organelles also within the cell, and they provide a large surface area, and they are site for receptors. Okay, so cell membranes also separate cells from one another. Okay, now let's go to other parts. We have the cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm has two parts. We have the cytomembrane, which is composed of the ER or the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi apparatus or the Golgi body. We have the vacuoles and the vesicles. And then we also have the aqueous part of the cytoplasm, which consists of the fluid cytosol. Okay? So in your cytoplasm, for the prokaryotic cells, you would see your ribosomes embedded on it. Okay, so these are the sites of protein synthesis. Okay, so clusters of these are called your polyribosomes. Okay, so now we have your cytoplasm. So in this picture, you would see the clear area. Okay, so where everything is located, that is your cytoplasm. Okay, so it is a semi-fluid substance enclosed by a cell's plasma membrane, and the composition of cytoplasm actually differs from the fluid outside the cell. Okay, so now we have the different organelles. So these are the structures that perform or carry out a specialized metabolic function inside the cell. Okay, so let's get to know your different organelles. So we have your nucleus. So the nucleus is an organelle with two membranes that holds a eukaryotic cell's DNA. Okay? So sa mga eukaryotes, they don't have the nucleus, but they have the nucleoid region. Okay? So this is where the DNA is concentrated. Now, we also have the cell wall. So this is common only in plants, in the plant cell. So cell wall is not found in your animal cell. Okay? So they're semi-rigid, but they're permeable that they also surround the plasma membrane of some cells. Okay. So next again, we mentioned the ribosome. So this is the organelle for protein synthesis, and this is composed of your ribosomal RNA and your ribosomal proteins. So for the nucleus, let's just go back to your nucleus. So it actually again contains the cell's DNA. So it has different parts like the pores, receptors, and transport proteins that actually control the movement of molecules into and out of the nucleus. Okay, so the nuclear envelope actually protects now your DNA. Okay, so next, let's have the endomembrane system. So again, it includes now your rough and smooth endoplasmic reticulum, vesicles, and Golgi bodies. Okay. So this is actually the series of interacting organelles between the nucleus and the plasma membrane. Okay. So if this is the nucleus and then this is your um endomembrane system. Okay, everything between them. Okay, ito yung rough endoplasmic reticulum, then you'll have your smooth endoplasmic reticulum, then eventually you'll have other parts, other organelles. Okay, so they make and modify lipids and proteins, and they recycle molecules and particles such as worn out cell parts and inactivates toxins. So specifically for the membrane system, we have two types for the ER system. So we have the rough ER and the smooth ER. So the rough ER is called rough because of the presence of your ribosomes for protein production. While for the smooth ER, obviously they don't have the ribosomes. Okay, so the endoplasmic reticulum is actually an extension of the nuclear envelope. Okay, so as you could see here, the blue dots in the second image, these are the ribosomes found in your rough ER, while the other one, the orange part, would be your smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Okay. So next we have the vesicles. Okay. So the vesicles are small membrane enclosed sac-like organelles, and they either store, transport, or degrade its contents. Okay. So we have two vesicles. We have the peroxisomes and the lysosomes. Okay. So the peroxisome is the enzyme-filled vesicle that is responsible for the breaking down of amino acids, fatty acids, and toxic substances, while for the lysosomes, these are the vesicles with enzymes for intracellular digestion. Okay, so let's go to other parts of the endomembrane system. We also have the Golgi body. So this also looks like the endoplasmic reticulum. However, they are separate. Okay, so the Golgi body is an organelle that modifies polypeptides and lipids, and they sort and package the finished products into transport vesicles. Okay. Now, the vacuoles, these are fluid-filled organelles that isolate or dispose of waste, debris, or toxic materials out of the cell. Okay. Now, we also have two structures that are similar or that look alike. So we have the mitochondria and the chloroplasts. Okay. So take note that your chloroplasts can only be found in your plants. Okay. So the mitochondria or the mitochondrion is a double-membered organelle that produces ATP or adenosine triphosphate. Okay. So adenosine triphosphate is the energy currency of the cell, or it is responsible for the energy of your cell. Okay, and then we have the chloroplast, which is obviously the organelle of photosynthesis. Okay, so mitochondria and chloroplasts have their own DNA, and it is said that they may have evolved through endosymbiosis. Okay, now let's go to the structures responsible for the support and responsible for keeping the shape of the cell. We have the cytoskeleton. Okay, so the cytoskeleton is a dynamic network of protein filaments that support, organize, and move the cells, the eukaryotic cells, and their internal structures. Okay, so three components of the cytoskeleton: we have the microtubules, the microfilaments, and the intermediate filaments. Okay, so the microtubules are involved in movement, and they are composed of hollow filaments of tubulin subunits, while the microfilaments, these are the reinforcing cytoskeletal elements, and they are composed of actin subunits. Okay. Now we have the intermediate filaments, intermediate. Okay, so they are in the middle. So these are the elements that lock cells and the tissues together. Okay, now there are some surface extensions that would allow for certain actions or movements of the cell. Okay, so in this picture, we have a prokaryote, and it has several surface extensions such as the flagellum and the pili. Okay, so the flagellum, or its plural is the flagella, it is a long slender cellular structure used for mobility. Okay, while for the pilus, so this is a protein filament used to help cells cling to or move across surfaces. So this is for attachment. Okay, so for this eukaryote, it has pili, or the plural for the pilus. So this is for the attachment to a surface or to other cells. Okay. So for the eukaryotes, one example of a cell that has a flagellum is the sperm cell. Okay. Now let's go to another surface extension. We have the cilia. Okay. So the cilia is short hair-like structures that project from the plasma membrane of some eukaryotic cells, and its coordinated beating rather steers the fluid, and it propels the motile cells. Okay. So examples of cilia, this could be found in your airways, okay, for the eukaryotes. Okay. Now, this image would be a summary of all the important organelles or important parts of the cell. So I got this, I downloaded this from the internet. I saw this created by Beatrice, the biologist. Okay. So if your organelles could talk, this would be their script. Okay, so I hope you learned something from this video. So the different cell types, you have the prokaryotes and the eukaryotic cell, and further division of the eukaryotic cell, we have the animal cells and the plant cells. Okay, different organelles of the cell, we have the nucleus, the mitochondria, the ribosomes, the different vesicles such as the lysosome and the peroxisome. We have the endomembrane system composed of the endoplasmic reticulum, the rough and the smooth, the Golgi bodies, and then we have now your vacuoles and other parts. Okay, so if there's something I missed, you just go back to our video and watch it again. Okay, so I will see you in our next video. Bye.